Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. Today, we're going to have a look at Amazon Bedrock Data Automation. In this session, we're going to go through how to make use of Bedrock Data Automation, specifically for the use case of image summarization. What we'll go through is a little bit about how BDA works. We'll also go into how to set up a BDA project for image summarization. And we'll also look at some code that you can make use of to invoke the BDA service for image summarization. So the way that BDA works is it's a way of processing unstructured data, and you can process different types of modalities. You can process images, videos, audio, or text, and the text can be either PDFs or docx or anything like that. Now, for this use case, we're only going to focus on image processing, and specifically, we're going to look at how to summarize images. So if you want to go into any of the other types of modalities, just let me know in the comments below. I'd happily do a video on those. So the first thing to know is that there's two types of ways of processing documents. And when I refer to documents from now on, I'm referring to either text documents, audio documents, video, or images. So just when I say that, just mean that I'm not necessarily talking about text or PDFs, but when I say documents, it's referring to different types of modalities. And there's two different ways of processing these modalities or documents. The first one is called standard output. And you can think of standard output as the default outputs that you get when you're processing these different types of documents. These are built into Bedrock Data Automation, and you can enable them with different toggles within the Bedrock Data Automation console. The second way is with something called blueprints, and blueprints allow you to get a more fine-grained processing of very specific types of documents. So for instance, you might want to process a ID book, you might want to process a driver's license, you might want to process different types of forms, or you might want to do specific analysis on an image, for instance, with marketing material, or you want to do specific types of analysis with different types of documents. We're not specifically going to make use of blueprints today because within the standard output, we do already have the image summarization feature. So the second thing is that with Bedrock Data Automation, you have to make use of cross-region inference. And what that means is explained a little bit in this blog post, a little bit down the page, but it means that when you invoke Bedrock Data Automation, it's going to be doing some sort of machine learning AI process to understand what's going on in that document. There's not always a guarantee that you will have the document stay in that region for processing reasons. And what that means is if you are in a confidential environment or you're working with personal identifiable information, PII, or you're working with in a specific restricted context, you just got to make sure that you are allowed to move those documents into another region from a data management perspective, because there are certain types of documents in certain countries that might have restrictions on how documents are processed. So the good news is that when you go over to the docs, you can actually see they've documented when you're using Bedrock Data Automation Service in a specific region, which other regions it is going to process that information. It could be any of these regions, just bear that in mind. But for instance, if you were to use Ireland, it's going to process in one of the other EU countries. So you might still be able to use Bedrock Data Automation in this use case. I'll leave that up to you to have a look at and make sure that you are compliant when you're making use of this service. What we'll look at next is the standard outputs that you get built in with Bedrock Data Automation. If you look at the docs here, you can see on the left, it documents the different modalities that are available and the standard outputs that you get for each of those modalities. The standard outputs you can enable with different toggles. I'll show you how to do that later. But with specifically images, you can see there's a couple of really neat ones that are built in to the service, and you can switch these on and off as you please. The thing to bear in mind is that when you submit a document and you have different outputs enabled, it will process all of them and you will get a bill based on those different outputs that you are extracting from that document. The one that we're going to use today is just image summary, and you can see it's part of the standard output. But take a look at the other ones because they could be useful for upcoming projects that you might be working on. So that's the summary. Let's implement image summarization with Bedrock Data Automation. So here we are in the AWS console. The first thing we want to do is check the region that we're working in. The reason for this is because, first of all, Bedrock data automation is only available in certain regions. It is available in more regions than some of the Bedrock services we've covered in the past, and that's because it makes use of this cross-region inference mechanism. And I'd recommend just taking a look at the docs to know which regions are available for this service. And I'm using Ireland because it's both available there and it's just closest to where I work most of the time. So now we've selected the right region. Let's go over to Bedrock. And from the Bedrock console, we go over to the left under Build, Data Automation. And here in the data automation console, we can see that there's a couple of features that you can play around with. You can take a look at some of the demos that are available. It's got some information about the use cases. And remember I said about blueprints, if you go to Manage Blueprints, you can see some of the sample blueprints that are available, and they are sorted by modality. So for instance, there's image, there's a document, should be a video and audio in here somewhere. So we're not going to make use of the blueprints today. So we'll go back to data automation. From here, we go to set up projects. So to create the project, we're going to go over to create project. And here we're going to give a name for our project. You can also choose what type of encryption to enable for this project. And you can also tag your project, which I would recommend if you want to be able to allocate costs later down the line. But for this demo, we're going to leave out the tags and we're just going to go with the project name. So now the project's created, we are left with the project overview page. I'll close this part over here. We have a lot of information about the project. For instance, we have the project ARN. We will need that for inserting into our code. But you can see here the different tabs for the different types of outputs. So standard output is the defaults that are available with Bedrock Data Automation. Custom output is where you set up different blueprints that you want to process your specific document modalities with. And in advanced settings, you can actually enable specific modalities for this project. So for instance, if you only wanted to process images and you might have different files that are coming into Bedrock Data Automation, you only want to process images and get that output, you can enable just that modality for this project. Now we're going to go back over to standard, and within the standard outputs, you can see that for each modality, there are a number of different checkboxes, and these checkboxes dictate what kinds of outputs would be produced by Bedrock Data Automation when you submit these different modalities to that service. So for instance, here in the image section that we're interested in, we can see that image text recognition is enabled, image summarization is enabled, and also bounding boxes are enabled. So what this means is that when we submit an image, it will both check for text in that document. It will also summarize the image. And the bounding boxes means that it will actually put a square or give you the coordinates of where it thinks the text is in this case. And so that can be useful if you want to have some sort of data labeling process in your application. We're going to disable a lot of these because we're only interested in image summarization for this demo. And you can see the different outputs in different modalities in here. So to disable the outputs, we are going to go back up to the top. We're going to go to Edit. We're going to go down and we're going to just go to Advanced Settings. And I'm actually just going to, for ease of use, I'm just going to disable all of the modalities that are not image. So what that means is if I was to accidentally upload a document instead of an image, it's not going to process that document in any way. And so we can sort of further ensure that we're not going to incur costs that we don't want. And then in the standard output, you'll see that the different modalities have now got this disabled feature. So I'm going to disable bounding boxes and I'm going to disable image text recognition. So the only thing I have here is image summarization. Obviously for your project, you might want to enable different ones and see the outputs. But if you're just following along for this tutorial, then maybe you just want to start with just this one selected. So now that we've selected the type of outputs that we want for this project, we're going to go back over and save the changes. So that's it for the Bedrock console. The next thing we need to do is create two buckets. The first bucket is for the input images, and the second one is for where the output of the BDA service will be stored. Let's go over to the S3 console to do that. So from the S3 console, we're going to create two buckets. The first one is our input bucket, where we're going to upload images for processing by Bedrock Data Automation. We go create bucket. We give our bucket a name. And we can leave the rest of the fields as is, or you can add some tags if you want to. But just for the demo, I'd recommend just keeping it as default and hitting create bucket. Now that the input bucket is created, we'll do the same process for the output bucket. So now that we've got both of our input and output buckets set up, we've set up a Bedrock Data Automation project. That's pretty much it for the console. Let's go over and have a look at the code. So here we are in the code. It is available in a just go and have a look below. Feel free to make use of the code as much as you want. It's really useful just to test out this project if you are following along by yourself. The code is very simple. It uses this .env load.env package to load in some environment variables. It sets up a Boto3 client, which is what you would need to invoke different services, or specifically the BDA service within AWS. We also have S3 client because we start off by uploading a file. And then you can see a couple of the functions: upload to S3, invoke the data automation service, get the status. So I'll go over a little bit of how this works in an image. And the way that the script works is like in this diagram. The Python code you can see executing below. It's going to start by uploading a file to S3. It's then going to invoke the Bedrock Data Automation service. What the invocation does is Bedrock Data Automation at this current time is an asynchronous service. So what that means is that when you invoke it, you provide it with both the input bucket, an object, and the output a location where you want the outputs to be stored at the end. And in response, you get an invocation ARN. And what you then do with the invocation ARN is you do a wait function, and then you continuously poll to wait for it to respond. In that process of waiting, BDA will ingest your document from the input bucket. It will then do its analysis on the document, and then it will put the output, which is in the form of JSON files, into the S3 output bucket. So in the process of waiting, you're waiting for this process to finish. There will be a status success, and then you can go and fetch the S3 object with the results in, and then you can go and pass that. So let's go back over to the code. Now we're back in the code. You can see some of these functions, and they kind of start to make a little bit more sense. So we've got the upload to S3. We're invoking the data automation, where you can see we're calling invoke data automation async. We're providing the input output configurations as well as the project ARN. And then we're going to go, if we go down a little bit, we can see our waiters getting the automation status. And then once the status is successful, we'll get the outputs. All of the processing happens in this function, process image for summary. And you can see it kind of goes through each of those different phases as I showed you in the diagram. So before we run this, we just need to set everything up in our .env file. And that's where we're going to provide all of our environment variables that we've got created in our console. So here we have the .env file. And remember, all of these environment variables are going to be loaded into our application when we start it up. So we started with the project ARN. This you can go and find from that Bedrock console. So here in the Bedrock Data Automation console, we've opened up our BDA demo project, and we'll copy the ARN from here. Now with our project ARN set up, the next is to put in our input and output bucket names. So the last thing is the profile ARN. Now remember what I said is that the Bedrock Data Automation service does cross-region inference. So this is a way to refer to which different regions you want to have that inference happening. To get this, there's no way I've really found in the console to find this variable, but you have to go over to the documentation to find it. So here in the documentation, we have this doc called Cross-Region Support Required for Bedrock Data Automation. It goes into the details, as I talked about cross-region inference. Because we're in our source region is Ireland, we're going to choose this ARN over here, and you can see it's a Data Automation Profile ARN. We'll just copy it over. So we're going to paste in the ARN, and then we're going to replace this account ID over here with our account ID. So now our environment variables are set. We can now go ahead and run our application, and we can test out the Bedrock Data Automation service. So to run the application, we're going to make use of a tool called IPython. I would really highly recommend making use of this tool when you're playing around with Python files or applications. It's a really cool way to introspect and sort of work with your code in a way that's very intuitive, and it's very informative about how your application behaves. It's been very useful in the past for me when I was learning Python. And the way you invoke it is by going IPython -I, and you just put the name of the file, and it will drop you into a shell, and now you can start to play around with the different functionalities within the Python code. To run our application, we're going to just invoke the process image for summary function. So I'm going to just type it in here, process image for summary, and I'm going to put in the path to the file that we want to process. And for this file, it's just a boathouse.image, and I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. And I'm just going to hit enter. And you can see it starts off processing, and it's going to do that upload to S3 process, and then it's going to invoke and then wait for a result. Now the image that we got here is this boathouse image over here. As you can see below, it's taken about 20 seconds to come back. And you can see immediately that there's two sections to this output. The first is metadata, which is just some metadata about the type of processing that's occurred on this input document. And you can see that there's a standard output path, which indicates that the standard output has been processed for this image. If you go down a little bit further, you can see what's called a segment. And you can see what I mentioned here before, just above that, is that within the result here, there was actually a secondary object that needed to be fetched. So this metadata was the first output, and then it would have had to go and fetch this second result.json output, and that's what you can get the segment from. In the segment, you can actually see standard output path, which shows the metadata, and it also shows image to represent the modality. And here we can see our summary, and you can see it shows wooden house situated on stilts above a body of water, river or canal, corrugated metal. And you can see it does a pretty good job of understanding what's going on inside of this image. The metadata also has a little bit of information such as like the encoding type, the size of the image. And if you were to enable different types of outputs in the console, you would see these different outputs appear in this JSON object. So that is the image summarization process, how you do it with Bedrock Data Automation. The last thing I want to show is just how to clean everything up so that you don't incur any extra costs if you were to do this by yourself. So to do that, we're going to go back over to the S3 console. Here from the S3 console, we're going to go just select the first bucket here. We're going to choose empty. And with that added, we'll just hit empty. So that removes all of the objects that we've uploaded. And then we can exit, and then we can go here and hit delete. And then we're going to do the same process for the output bucket. And now with both buckets deleted, we'll go back to the Bedrock console to go and delete the Bedrock Data Automation project. Here from the Bedrock console, we go to Data Automation. We hit Set Up Projects. We select the project and we hit Delete and then Confirm. So that's everything deleted. So that's it for today. Hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully you'll make use of Bedrock Data Automation in your next upcoming project. If you have any feedback, please let me know. I'm happy to accept it. And let me know if you want any specific videos on different features that you've seen in AWS in the future. Thank you.